Hello, everyone. This is Fortune from Numinous Press, and today I'm going to do a video walkthrough of our tarot card journal, the Great Workbook. There is already a couple of really good walkthroughs of the book from Rose Honey Ritual and from Siren, both who have YouTube channels. I'll put a link to both of those down below. And those are probably going to be way more fun and exciting than this one will be. But I wanted to do one of our own so that you all could see a little bit kind of behind the scenes of what goes into this book, both physically and creatively, kind of the history of where we got to where we are now. So first of all, I just want to say something about the creation, because I've been told I really don't say it enough. I guess maybe I don't think about it as much as I should. But just so you know, we actually make every single one of these books ourselves. Both of us at Numinous Press have worked in the print industry for almost 30 years each. And so we've accumulated some interesting printing and binding equipment in our little studio here. Plus we both still we both work for a big commercial printer. So we also have access to lots of bigger industrial equipment so that we can make these things. So just so that you know, everyone, when you get one of your books, just know that our hands have built these books for you. That's also why you're never going to see perfectly manicured hands in these videos from either of us, because we spend a lot of time making things out of paper and working with paper and printing equipment, and it tends to show over time. So let's take a look a little bit at kind of physically how this book is made. So when I started exploring the different ideas for how to put together this book, we went through different types of binding and tried to decide which would be the best. We ended up with this wire binding. I guess I've never really been a big fan of wire binding, but it has its place. And definitely for something that is more like a journal like this is, that you're going to write in and color in, it just works better. You can always flip it back, sit it in your lap, write in it, turn it around, write in it. It just kind of works better. It also lays flat, which is kind of important for some of these lessons that kind of span across the book. Perfect binding is beautiful. I love perfect binding, but it just was not the solution for this kind of book. You can't open perfect binding all the way, and it becomes cumbersome when you're trying to write as in a journal. We thought about saddle stitch books, but I really wanted a spine on the book. And we definitely explored the idea of doing kind of a case-bound book, a hard case-bound. That's quite an expense for us right now, though, and we definitely are planning on that in the future, because I really like the idea of having a nice case-bound book with a good binding that will lay flat at some point. That's what we would like to do. So as far as the physical components that go into this, into the paper, on the covers, these are printed on very thick, what's called folding board. I printed on an offset printing press. And both back cover and front cover are double folded back over so that they're nice and thick and sturdy. When these things come off the printing press, they're actually really wide. They're about 27 inches wide. And then we come in and we fold and glue the back cover and the front cover down. So maybe you can see what that looks like a little bit. You can see right there how it's double folded back so that you get a nice sturdy front and back cover. So, so it's double thick. We also do what's called a concealed wire binding. So you can see it kind of hanging out in the back right here. You don't see it from the spine. And the way that's accomplished, just to give you an idea, is looks something like this when it's punched into the book. So that as the back cover comes back around, this wraps around the binding so that you have a nice spine, so that it doesn't really look like a, you know, just a notebook sitting on a shelf. It looks like a more important book than that. Little spine there. All throughout the book, you're going to see these divider pages. They're made out of kind of a thick, heavy-duty craft paper, just to kind of give you a visual separation through the book. And then all of the text pages in here, all the rest of the book is made out of 100-pound text, opaque paper. And what that means is that 100-pound text is a very heavy text weight paper, but it's still thin enough to move around in the book. Opaque means that you can't really see through it. And that was very important to me because, you know, because this is a journal, but it also has a lot of activities for writing. I didn't want stuff like coming through. There's also places to color in this book, and I didn't want that necessarily showing through either. So we went with opaque paper. I also thought it was very important to not use bright white paper. Bright white paper can be kind of hard on the eyes, so we chose what's called a warm white paper for all of the text pages in the book. So that's kind of physically how it's made. Let's talk a little bit about how it came to be. So I started studying tarot cards a very, very long time ago, many, many years ago. And when I started to try to expand my knowledge on the tarot cards and study different decks, kind of at the same time, and trying to compare them, you know, obviously most of us write things down in journals, and that's what I was doing. I was writing stuff in journals, and, you know, you fill up one journal, and then you go to the next one and you start something else, you know, and I was also reading a lot of different books at the time. So information got really, really scattered, and it became really hard for me to, it's kind of a nightmare to cross-reference anything that was in all these different journals and kind of all over the place. So what I did was I started trying to condense and put some of the information from these journals into spreadsheets, so that I could then have one place to start to kind of keep track of everything that was in these books. And when I did that, a lot of things came to light. I started seeing things that I hadn't noticed before. I started seeing patterns in the way the cards were built. I started trying to understand the discrepancies I was seeing between some of the decks. And so having it in these spreadsheets really kind of changed the way that I looked at the tarot cards. I just saw many more things than I was seeing in all these scattered journals. And plus it was all right there in one place in front of me. So when other people started seeing this, they were like, wow, I would really like to have something like this. So as a graphic designer, I kind of went to work and made some very crude versions of journals that kind of had spreadsheets in them, and they kind of worked for what their purpose was. But I really started thinking that this could be something a little bit bigger and a little bit better. And really started putting a lot of thought process into well, how could I make a spreadsheet fun? A little bit more interesting than just like filling out the typical information in them, but also turn it into kind of a teaching tool, and so that people could start to see all these interesting things I was seeing from my own spreadsheets. So I went to work starting to create this, and the creativity and the thought processes just began to flow, and it all happened really fast. And these ideas for all these lessons combined with a journal, it, I say it happened really fast, but honestly, this book took me about 4 years to make, to kind of get it to the point that you see today. And then we just kind of went into, trying to physically figure out how to make this happen. So I was able to use my, professional life skills to actually make the book and make it something it is. So that's really kind of creatively where I came from with this book. We will look through this and you'll see, we'll go through all the lessons one at a time. I am going to do individual videos for each one of the activities in this book. So in this video, I'm not going to spend any time explaining each activity. I might explain a little bit, just enough to give people kind of an idea of what's in the book, so that if you're interested in purchasing this, then you can kind of get an idea of what it is that you're buying, since you can't really, at this point, it's not sitting in a bookstore somewhere for you to actually pick up and look at. That this video would solve that problem. Okay, so we start out with just a little opening page for the place to put your name and contact, should you choose to do that. A title page. An introduction about me and my thought processes behind creating the book, some of which I already told you, but there's a little bit more information in here. And then I kind of go into talking about how we suggest that you use this book. So if you get this book, read this. There's a lot of important information in here about the progression of things, and really how you should approach using the book. Lots of good information in here to kind of help you along. And then we come to table of contents. I wanted to give you a page for your own table of contents as well. It's something that I thought of. It was always an afterthought when I did journals, like, wow, I should have left a page open for some kind of table of contents, so I could write down what was on some of these pages. So that's why I put this here for you, in case that you want to call out some specific pages that are meaningful to you. You can do so in your own table of contents. And then here's ours. It gives you all of the page numbers of everything. So we begin with astrology. It's really the most logical place to begin when we're studying the tarot cards. It's the easiest in the book. And astrology then follows into the Kabbalah and then the tarot. So we start out with astrology. Both in the astrology and the Kabbalah section, there's a title page like this, which just kind of gives you a list of the activities that are going to be in this particular chapter. So we come to our first lesson. And so I'll spend a little bit of time with this one, because the way this kind of works is going to be how a lot of the lessons work. This is the lesson on astrological symbols. And you can see here that, again, this kind of looks like the spreadsheets I talked about. And the information that is asked of you is up here at the top. Sometimes it'll be down the side. It just depends on what layout worked best for the lesson. And in all of these lessons, So I spent quite a bit of time writing these very elaborate instructions for all of these activities. And they started adding a lot of pages to the book, which is already enormous, 250 pages. Not only that, but it was starting to take, some of them took a lot of space away from writing space. And so that bugged me for a really long time about, as a designer, how do I keep this from happening? So I figured the best way was to just let you learn by example. And the way I do that is in every one of these activities. You can see here, get that in focus, I give you the answers to one whole set in every single one of these, so that you can kind of get this idea of what information is going to be asked of you in each one of these activities. So let's look at this one, just so you kind of understand what's going on. You know, it's going to ask you for the zodiac sign. There's Aries. The word Aries is expected to go here. Zodiac symbol, there's the symbol of Aries. Its planet is Mars. We write Mars there. Planet symbol is here. The element would be fire. And the elemental symbol, it's the symbol of fire right there. The modality is cardinal. The tarot card suit is the wands. And the tarot cards that are related to Aries are the Emperor, the 2, 3, 4, and wands. So that kind of gives you an idea of how you're supposed to go about filling in the rest of the astrological signs here. Now, you can work this either way you want. You can go in, you can fill out all of Aries through here, you know, or you can start and put all of your astrological signs down here and work them all in this way. It's up to you. I tried to make this book as open and accessible as possible so that people could record information in the way that makes sense to them. It's very, very important to me. You're also going to see something is that this information that you put down, not just in the astrological symbols, but in other places in the book, information is going to be repeated one lesson after another. And in the beginning of the book, we definitely suggest with these lessons that you follow them in the order that they're presented, because one lesson builds upon the previous lesson. I also tell you in the beginning of the book, in that introduction, that I'm a firm believer that writing by hand helps solidify and accelerate the memorization process. And so that's why I think you should write this, and rather than it being kind of a cheat sheet. And not only that, but the repetition of writing things over and over again is really going to help you memorize a lot of stuff. Trust me, if you can get through this whole book and fill this whole thing out, you're gonna remember a lot of things, because you're going to repeat stuff over and over and over again. But one of the reasons that you're going to have to repeat them is, like I said before, cross-referencing is very important to me. For this book, and for tarot cards, so that you can approach the sign of Aries, you can approach it from an astrological standpoint and look at this point in the book, or you can come back here and, you know, into one of the other sections in the Kabbalah and find out something about Aries from that angle, or you can look at it in your tarot card journals from that angle too, and still find the information that you're looking for. So I wanted it to be able to provide you with information from multiple angles. So that means you're going to have to write this stuff over and over and over again, but hopefully you find that as enjoyable as I do. So anyway, let's carry on. After you complete the astrological symbols, we're going to go into the minor arcana and the decans. And it looks similar to the lesson you had before. This one's a little bit different because it doesn't span all the way across. You're not going to write it all the way across. This one starts with Aries and works down to Virgo and then comes back up here to Libra. and works down to Pisces. But you can see your example text in light gray there. Sorry, just over here. Again, I put that example text in a very, very light gray so that you can write over it in your own hand. That way it doesn't just look like, I guess, your 5th grade math sheet, with one answer at the top written in print and then your handwriting in the rest of it. I thought it would be important for your handwriting to be everything. So that's why it's very, very light gray. That's kind of why I have to show it to you like that, because it is very, very light. But anyway, this lesson is all about the decans. And you can see each astrological sign is split into 3 pieces for each of the 3 decans of each sign. These little letters that you see at the top are to help reference in later lessons. And I'll show you that when we get there. It'll give you a page number and a column number so that you can reference when you're doing more complicated lessons. The third activity is astrology of the major arcana and the trump cards. This one's a very simple lesson again, just your trump cards and what astrological attributes they may have. Had some extra space here, so I figured I would give you a place to write down some what I call qualities. That would be your own personal thoughts about each of these cards. If I have extra space, I always give you some room for writing something like that. So when we get into the court cards in lesson 4 here, court cards always get really complicated. They're more complicated than they seem on the surface. There's a lot of stuff going on in the court cards. If you don't know that already, you will after you work in this book. I gave you quite a bit more information in this one, simply because, the way that these figureheads, your king, queen, and page, your king, queen, and knight, are a little bit different than your page and your ace. They just have different attributes. So that's kind of how this is sectioned out. But I tried to give you a little bit more example text in these guys so you could kind of get a feeling. Again, a place for your qualities down the side. And with the court cards, one of the things that is difficult is that so many different decks have different figurehead names for them. There's even a little blurb about that up here at the top, a hint. So that's why I use the queen as example in all of the court card lessons, is simply because the queen is the one name that's the same in almost all the decks. I didn't want to put king here if you're using a deck that calls it knight. So that could get confusing. So I just kind of stuck to the queen. So the 5th lesson is kind of a long one. It requires quite a bit of information to explain how to fill out these astrology wheels. This is where all the little numbers that I just showed you at the top of the columns in the lessons come in, so that you can find the information to put into the astrology wheel. There's some instruction there. Lots of places to practice as well. And then this is the big fold out wheel, where all that information will be put. And I can show you a quick example in my book, my personal copy, of what that kind of looks like. Some of you may have already seen it in my some of my posts. Mine's quite worn because I pull it out for posts and photograph it all the time. But there's mine. It's kind of what that looks like when you get it all done. And all of this information that you see in here is information that you put into these lessons. Okay. So, once you're done with that, at the end of both the astrology and the Kabbalah chapters, I thought it was very important to give you a journal. that was specific only to these things. There is a tarot card journal in the back, but I wanted journal pages specifically for astrology and specifically for the Kabbalah. So the astrology journal is similar to the tarot card journal, but they're only 12 pages, one for each sign. And all the journal pages, there are little sidebars and sometimes some things on the bottom for you to add this information as you're going along. These journal pages do not have to be done in any order. They are free for you to put information in as you're going, after you're doing it. You can put information in there first. It really doesn't matter. The journal pages it's up to you how you use these pages. Usually the first page of each kind of journal, again, I give you that light gray text so that you can kind of see the information that's expected in there without having to give you some kind of long explanation. Trust me, when I wrote these instructions out, they were pages, and I'm like, no one wants to read this because I don't even like reading it. So I figured the example text is just a little bit easier on all of us. So you get one journal page for each of the zodiac signs. And then that's it for the astrology chapter. Then we're going to move on to the tarot and the Kabbalah chapter. Same thing's going to go on here. First of all, there's a little bit of information to kind of give you a preview of a lot of things that are to come. And then there's this little activity page, shows you the activities just as before in the astrology section. So lesson 7, which is actually the first lesson in the Kabbalah chapter, but lesson 7, we're going to start out with just the Hebrew letters. For this lesson, I actually gave you all of these letters. I typed them out in there. Mainly, I kind of did it for me, but for you too. I am not that great at writing Hebrew, and I am certainly not very good at calligraphy. And so for me, I needed a place to really kind of trace these letters. And I thought that would be important to do first. If these letters are something you already know, then you can do it in your own style. But for those of you that don't, you have something you can trace. And down here at the bottom, there's some information for the Tetragrammaton. So you can kind of get all this stuff put together that relates to Hebrew letters. Lesson 8 there's a lot of going on in here, but it's actually a pretty simple lesson. It's just labeling the parts of the Kabbalah, so that you can kind of get an idea of the architecture of it and some of the names and what they're called, what's kind of going on here. It's pretty simple though. Lesson 9 is also very simple. It is just basically, you're going to be labeling all the Sephiroth and the paths on this lesson. Kind of give you an idea of where to start, but honestly, you can put whatever information you really want in here. I found that, even though this was just kind of a simple lesson, I use this one all the time when I'm referencing stuff in the book. I'm always flipping back to this page because it's hard to keep up with all the path numbers. The Sephiroth are pretty easy because there's only 10, but there's 22 paths, so it gets a little bit hard to remember sometimes. So this one is probably one of, other than the big astrology wheel and the big fold-out Kabbalah poster, this is where the fold-out activities began. This one is going into the models of the 4 worlds, which I really tried to make this as simple and understandable as possible and to show you different ways in which the 4 worlds are portrayed. Again, we'll do a video where we explain a lot of this more in depth, so I don't want to get into it right now, but just so you know, this lesson is all about understanding the models. Again, this is repetitive information. It's going to get repeated over and over and over again, but you can start to see how it gets applied to these different ways of viewing the four worlds of the Kabbalah. Lesson 11 is probably the biggest, actually is the biggest, because this lesson spans 2 fold-outs. This is all about how the major arcana and the paths and the colors in the Kabbalah all kind of come together. It's organized by path, but you can put your tarot cards in. And then all of your information, again, here we go, repeating the astrology information, if you can see that. But now we're adding Kabbalistic information with that as well. So that lesson that you did before, back in the astrology with your trump cards, is all going to come back around again right here. When we get into this side of the book, we're going to talk about the Kabbalistic color scales. And there's a place for writing each of their names. And my intention with this is that you write your color name here, and these little boxes are for you to actually color in. And it looks something like this. Let's go back and take a peek at my ratty old book. And once these colors are filled in, that's what they look like. Quick preview of that one too. You'll see this one in just a second. This is what they look like when you get them colored in, colored pencil. A little preview there. All right, so let's get this folded back up. Oh, and not forget this one. This one is probably the most complex lesson in the book. I really struggled with how to present all of the information. Again, this is about the court cards. The court cards always are a complicated subject. So much goes into them. But this is lesson 12. It's the court cards, the four worlds, and the tetragrammaton. Again, I will do a more in-depth lesson on this. But this one requires you to really, really use your brain. Because it's got information from the tetragrammaton, information from your four worlds, and then these 2 pieces that you see at the top and the side, they combine in to try and show you how the court cards are kind of fashioned. Again, I'll do a video of that. But yes, this is the lesson for court cards in the four worlds. This one is pretty simple, but it takes a while. I just showed you that one in color. This is where you begin coloring the Tree of Life images in their proper colors. And we'll look at it in a minute, but I do have a reference sheet in the back with all of those colors in it that are from the Golden Dawn color scales for you to reference. So this is a lesson for the minor arcana, the Sephiroth, the color, and the four worlds. This one's a little bit complicated as well. Everything Kabbalistically becomes kind of complicated, but hopefully I've put it down in a way that you can sort it all out. I went ahead and put all this information in here. Let me pull it up so you can see. I went ahead and put all this information in here for you of all the court cards so you can see. It's the number of the cards and each of the suits. And the way this one works is all Kabbalistic information will be the same for 2s, but then they split up all the way across here, and then another place for color there. So you can kind of get a preview of what that looks like and what information is going into it. On this one, I put your information on the 2s because sometimes the aces are done a little bit different, so there just wasn't as much information, so I just went ahead and pre-filled the 2 for you. You can kind of see that there. So just as in the astrology section, we come to the part where we have a fold-out poster for you to fill in. And I gave you one for practice as well, so that before you go to filling this one in, you can play around with this idea and see, what information you feel you would like to add to this. It's really up to you. And again, just as in the astrology section, I wanted a journal specifically for each part of the Kabbalah. And so that means that there is 1 page for each of the Sephiroth, and each of the paths. So a total of 32 journal pages for the Kabbalah. And again, some pre-filled information for you down the sidebar, just as in the astrology section. So after that is complete, that's the end of your activities. That's it. Then we come to the rest of this is a journal. This part of the journal is devoted. There are 2 pages for every card in a traditional 78 card tarot deck. And they're split into subsections. Your major arcana, which will look like this. They're very similar to the journal pages you just saw. And I gave you some pre-filled information on the Fool, which will be the first one you come to. If you can fill that in. You're going to start with the major arcana, and then we will move on to the court cards. Same kind of thing going on here. Again, 2 pages. I thought it was very important to have these little sidebars so that you can transfer the information to the journal pages. And then I kind of did a little bit of a bullet journal here, and then line pages for all the journal pages. So after the court cards, then if I can find it here, probably should have bookmarked it. There we go. And then the minor arcana cards. Same kind of journal pages going on. Each of these sidebars is a little bit different depending on the section you're in, because there's different kinds of information that goes into either the court cards, the major or minor arcana. So after the journal, the very last part of the book are the reference charts. And my goal with these reference charts was that, so a lot of common and simple information, we went ahead and added it in here simply because, it's just nice to have, instead of going and having, I would find that I would have like 5 books sitting around me all the time just to reference simple information. So that's kind of how I built this reference section. So the first part of it is just simply, just for those that are interested in different tarot decks, it's a tarot deck comparison chart. And I only had really space for 3, so I chose Rider-Waite, Crowley Thoth, and Tarot de Marseille for these. I'm certainly open for suggestions on decks that anybody might think would be a better fit for these things, but I tried to choose something that was a little bit more popular and widespread because most decks are built similar to these. To these 3 at least. And then I give you some symbol reference keys, planets, zodiac signs, elements, suits, Hebrew alphabet, and tetragrammaton. So that you don't have to be constantly looking for that information as well. I put it in the back of this book here. I also gave you some information on Kabbalistic language. Again, this kind of hard information to keep track of, but it's all in here for you, should you choose. This one is very important in the book. The very last page. This is what's called the Kabbalistic color scales. These are the Golden Dawn color scales, as I pulled from 777. And this is what's going to help you complete your color lessons in the book. I have a video coming out very soon that shows you all about this information in the color, in coloring it in the book. But these are the color scales and their related symbols and their Kabbalistic reference, so that you don't have to go and try to track those down if you need them. So that's it, guys. This is the Great Workbook. So this again is kind of a new thing, and we're always open to suggestions from everyone, because we want this thing to grow and be the best that it can. So we're always open to suggestions. And yeah, I think that's it. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.